The Bifrost was broken. Yggdrasil's branches had withered. Yet Kratos found himself falling through a light that was neither rainbow nor root, a screaming tunnel of impossible colors that burned against his ashen skin like the fires of Olympus reborn. He clutched for the Leviathan axe at his back, but his hand grasped only void. The blades of chaos hung silent at his sides, their chains slack and cold. Around him, reality itself seemed to fracture. Not the familiar tear between realms he'd known in the Nine, but something fundamentally wrong. Mathematics instead of magic. Science where sorcery should be. Then the light shattered. Kratos slammed into metal flooring with enough force to crater stone, yet the surface barely dented. He rolled to his feet, battle instinct overriding confusion. So hands moving to weapon hilts that sparked but didn't ignite. His breath came steady despite the fall. Gods did not panic, but gods knew their domains. This was not his. The chamber around him pulsed with a sterile luminescence. No torches, no braziers, just panels embedded in walls that curved with unnatural precision. Symbols he didn't recognize scrolled across surfaces of black glass. The air tasted recycled, filtered, dead. No wind, no earth. No sky he could sense beyond the metal cage surrounding him. A doorway hissed open, another wrongness, metal parting without hinges or handles. 3 figures entered. Not warriors, though one wore gold across his shoulders in a pattern that suggested rank. They carried no visible weapons, wore no armor. The lead figure, dark-skinned, bald, and with eyes that measured rather than threatened, raised an empty hand in what might have been either greeting or surrender. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation's Starship Enterprise," the man said, his voice carrying authority without aggression. "You've materialized in our cargo bay through what appears to be an interdimensional rift. We mean you no harm." Kratos' fingers twitched toward the blades. The chains rattled. These soft words, this peaceful stance, he had heard similar before. From gods who called themselves benevolent, from kings who promised justice. They always lied. "Where is my son?" The words emerged as gravel scraped across stone. The 3 figures exchanged glances, a language Kratos recognized. Uncertainty. The woman with them, her hair bound severely back, held a small device that chirped softly. "Sir, I'm reading elevated adrenaline levels, accelerated healing of cellular damage, and energy signatures I can't identify. Whatever he is, he's not human. I am Kratos." He took a step forward. All 3 tensed despite their peaceful words. Good. They should fear. "I seek the boy. Where have you taken him?" "We have taken no one," Picard said, not retreating, but not advancing either. "You arrived alone. If you're searching for someone, perhaps we can help you find—" "I need no help from those who cage me," Kratos gestured at the chamber. "You speak of peace while surrounding me with metal walls. This is a cargo bay, not a prison," the captain replied. "You're aboard a starship, a vessel that travels between worlds. We're currently in orbit around a planet called Regulus 6. If your son arrives somewhere in this sector, our sensors might detect him." Starship. The word meant nothing. Kratos had sailed Tyr's temple between realms, had ridden Gjallarhorn's call across Yggdrasil itself. But those journeys felt like magic, like the old ways. This place hummed with something else. The cold precision of Hephaestus's forge, stripped of all artistry. The 3rd figure, a young man whose face carried boyish uncertainty, spoke quietly to Picard. "Captain, Commander LaForge reports the rift is collapsing. Whatever caused it is destabilizing. If there's anyone else coming through—" "There is no one else." Kratos forced the words past the tightness in his chest. Atreus had been with him. They'd been hunting in Midgard when the light came, when the impossible tunnel opened, when his boy's hand slipped from his grasp, when he'd failed. Again. When Picard studied him with those measuring eyes. "You've lost someone you care about. I understand that desperation, but let us help you. The Federation has resources across thousands of worlds. If your son is out there, we'll find him." "Federation." Kratos tested the word. Another empire, then. Another collection of lords and politicians who spoke of order while demanding submission. He'd burned Olympus for less. "And what do you demand in return for this help?" "Nothing," Picard said simply. "Helping those in need is what we do." The blades of chaos suddenly ignited with a roar, flames erupting from the chains as Kratos' patience shattered. He didn't attack. Not yet. But the message was clear. The three Federation officers stumbled back, and Kratos saw fear finally crack their peaceful masks. "I have heard such words before," he growled, fire reflecting in his eyes. "From Zeus, from Odin, from every god and king who sought to use me, I will find my son, with or without your permission." Alarms began to wail throughout the ship, and somewhere in the vast darkness beyond the Enterprise, among the stars that burned cold and distant, the god of war took his first breath in a universe that had supposedly evolved beyond the need for warriors. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Some journeys forge legends across dimensions. The ghost of Sparta's war with the final frontier had only just begun. The bridge of the Enterprise erupted into controlled chaos. Worf's hands flew across tactical, her shield snapping to full power as the Klingon officer's instincts screamed danger. Data's positronic brain processed the threat assessment in microseconds. The intruder's energy signature alone exceeded anything in their database outside of cosmic entities. "All hands, red alert," Riker commanded from the captain's chair, already moving toward the turbolift. "Security teams to Cargo Bay 3, activate force fields on all adjacent sections." "Belay that order, number one." Picard's voice crackled through the comm system, steady despite the alarms. "Stand down. I repeat, stand down." Riker's jaw tightened, but he gestured for Worf to comply. On the view screen, Regulus VI turned serenely below them, oblivious to the weapon of mass destruction that had just manifested on their ship. In the cargo bay, Picard kept his hands visible and empty. In the flames writhing along those chained blades cast dancing shadows across the bulkheads, and he could feel the heat from 3 meters away. Dr. Crusher's medical tricorder had already confirmed what his eyes told him. This being could likely tear through the Enterprise's hull with his bare hands. But violence was rarely the answer, almost never in his experience. "Kratos," he said quietly, using the name like an anchor, "extinguish your weapons. No one here is your enemy." "Then why do your warriors prepare to attack?" Kratos gestured upward, somehow knowing despite the solid ceiling that combat readiness rippled through the ship above. "I hear them moving, surrounding me. Your words say peace. Your actions say war." Picard tapped his comm badge. "All security teams maintain positions but do not advance. And that is a direct order." He looked back at Kratos. "Better?" The flames dimmed slightly, not extinguished, but banked. A concession. "You said you came from another dimension," Picard continued, slowly clasping his hands behind his back in a deliberately non-threatening posture. "In our experience, such rifts are rare and usually catastrophic. If you're searching for your son, the first step is understanding what brought you here. Will you at least allow us to examine the rift before it collapses completely?" Kratos' scarred face revealed nothing, but his grip on the blades loosened fractionally. "What sort of examination?" "Our chief engineer is the finest in Starfleet. If anyone can trace the rift's origin or destination, it's Geordi LaForge. Perhaps we can even find a way to reopen it, send you home." "I do not want home." The words emerged bitter and sharp. "I want my son." Wesley Crusher, still present despite his nervousness, spoke up. "Sir, if the rift was two-way, maybe his son came through somewhere else in the sector. We could expand our sensor grid, run a sweep for similar energy signatures." "Make it so," Picard said immediately, seeing Kratos' attention snap to the young ensign, with something that might have been desperate hope. "Wesley, coordinate with Geordi. I want a full subspace analysis within the hour." The boy nodded and hurried out, leaving Picard and Dr. Crusher alone with the god. "You trust him?" Kratos asked. "The boy?" "Wesley, with my life." Picard stepped closer, testing boundaries. Kratos didn't retreat, but the chains clinked as his muscles tensed. "He's young, but brilliant. Saved this ship more than once." Something flickered across Kratos' face, an expression too quick to read, but too profound to miss. The blades of chaos finally extinguished, smoke curling from the metal as the god lowered his arms. He looked suddenly tired, ancient beyond his apparent years. "My son is also young," Kratos said quietly. "Also brilliant, also brave beyond his years, and I have failed to protect him." Beverly Crusher's medical demeanor softened into pure compassion. Every parent feels that way when their child is in danger, but standing here won't help him. "Let us help you." "Why?" Kratos demanded. "Why would you help me? I am nothing to you, less than nothing. A stranger who appears in fire and ash, who threatens your ship, who knows nothing of your federation or your ways." Picard met his eyes without flinching. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because sentient beings helping one another is the foundation of civilization. Because I have also lost those I love, and I know that pain." He paused. "And because I believe you're not truly a threat. You're a father searching for his child. Everything else is just fear and fury masking desperation." The silence stretched between them like a blade's edge. Then Kratos' shoulders dropped infinitesimally, not submission, but acknowledgement. "Very well, I will accept your help. But know this, Captain. If you deceive me, if this is another god's trick or scheme, I will reduce your ship to slag and ash. I have killed gods before. I can kill again." "Duly noted," Picard replied, utterly calm. "Though I should mention we don't actually have gods in the Federation. We left superstition behind centuries ago." Kratos' laugh was harsh and joyless. "That is what they all say, until the gods come for them." The captain tapped his comm badge again. "Picard to bridge. Lower shields on Cargo Bay 3. Transport our guests directly to engineering. Commander LaForge, prepare for a visitor who requires your immediate attention." "Understood, sir," came Geordi's voice. "Though I should warn you, the Rift's quantum signature is unlike anything I've seen. It's almost like it's alive." Kratos' head snapped up. "Alive? A figure of speech," Beverly assured him. "Just unusual energy patterns." But Kratos shook his head slowly, memory stirring. "No, there are forces older than gods. Powers that predate even the Titans. Things that should not be disturbed." His hand moved unconsciously to a rune carved into his forearm. Nordic script that seemed to pulse with faint light. "Atreus and I were hunting when the light came. He saw something in it. Said it called to him." Picard and Crusher exchanged concerned glances. "Called to him how?" the captain asked. "In his mother's voice," Kratos whispered, "in the voice of the dead." The Enterprise hummed around them, 1,000 systems working in perfect harmony. But in the cargo bay, standing before a god of war from a universe where the impossible was commonplace, Captain Jean-Luc Picard felt the cold touch of genuine dread. Some mysteries, his experience told him, were better left unexplored, but they had already begun. Engineering was a cathedral of controlled energy, all pulsing light and harmonious machinery. Kratos materialized in a shimmer of golden particles. Another wrongness. His atoms scattered and reassembled like a child's toy, and immediately cataloged threats. Dozens of workers in colored uniforms, consoles that could be weapons, the massive pulsing cylinder at the chamber's heart that radiated power like a caged star. A man approached wearing a strange visor across his eyes, his smile genuine despite facing a being who had just threatened to destroy the ship. "I'm Commander Geordi LaForge, Chief Engineer. Welcome to the heart of the Enterprise." He gestured at the towering warp core. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Kratos stared at the antimatter reaction, at the fundamental forces being harnessed and controlled. "You cage the energy of creation itself." "Pretty much." Geordi's grin widened. "Though we prefer to think of it as a partnership, the dilithium crystals regulate the matter-antimatter reaction, converting it into the plasma that powers our warp drive. It lets us travel faster than light, cross distances that would take lifetimes in just days or hours. Faster than light. Kratos processed this. He had traveled between realms through the branches of Yggdrasil, had ridden the Bifrost Rainbow Bridge. But those were mystical paths, the domain of gods and magic. This was something else. You bend reality through science. That's one way to put it. Geordi led him to a console where data streamed in patterns too complex for mortal comprehension. Now about that rift. We've been analyzing the quantum signature, and frankly, it's giving us fits. The energy doesn't conform to any known subspace phenomenon. And it's almost like, he paused, adjusting his visor, like it's operating on principles that shouldn't exist in our universe. Magic, Kratos said flatly. We don't really have magic here, just physics we haven't fully understood yet. Then your physics is incomplete? Kratos moved closer to the display, recognizing nothing but sensing something familiar in the chaotic patterns. The 9 realms exist beyond your understanding. Gods shape reality through will and power. What you call impossible is simply knowledge you lack. Geordie's expression shifted from skepticism to fascination. Okay, let's approach this differently. In your universe, how do these rifts work? What causes them? The Bifrost once connected all realms. The World Tree's branches allowed passage between them, but both are destroyed. Kratos gestured at the data, frustrated by his inability to translate experience into their strange symbols. This feels older, deeper, like the void before creation. Before creation, a new voice entered the conversation. Data stepped forward, his pale features expressionless but his eyes alive with curiosity. An intriguing concept. Are you suggesting a pre-universal state? A quantum foam from which your 9 realms emerged? I am suggesting, Kratos said carefully, that there are forces older than Odin, older than Zeus, entities that watch the first gods crawl from primordial chaos. He touched the rune on his forearm again. My son carries the blood of such things. He is more than mortal, more than God. Data's head tilted with mechanical precision. A hybrid entity capable of accessing pre-universal energies would theoretically be able to create rifts between dimensional frameworks. The rift may not have been random. It may have been drawn to your son's unique quantum signature. Speak plainly, Kratos demanded. Something wanted your son, Geordie translated grimly, and it used him to open a door. The engineering deck fell silent except for the warp core's eternal hum. Kratos' hands moved to the blades of chaos, not drawing them but finding comfort in their familiar weight. Then we follow, he said simply. It's not that easy. Geordie pulled up a star chart, showing their position relative to the rift's collapse point. The rift closed before we could get a lock on its destination. The energy dispersed across subspace. When we're talking about trying to track a single particle across an entire galaxy. I have tracked prey across 9 realms, Kratos countered. I have hunted gods through time and death itself. Show me the path, and I will find him. Data stepped forward. Perhaps there is a way. If the rift was drawn to your son's specific energy signature, and if you share genetic material, you would theoretically emit a similar quantum resonance. We could use you as a template, a biological sensor to detect matching patterns. You would use me as a hound, Kratos said, no emotion in his voice. We would use science to amplify your connection to your son, Geordie corrected. Look, I can't promise it'll work. This is way beyond anything in the Starfleet manual. But if you're serious about finding him, and we need every advantage we can get. Kratos studied the engineer, searching for deception. He found only earnest determination. A man who loved his ship, respected his captain, and actually believed they could help. Fools, perhaps, but honest fools. Do what you must, he said finally. But know this, wherever the rift led, whatever took my son, it has made an enemy it cannot comprehend. I have toppled pantheons. I have broken prophecy itself. I will not stop until he is safe. Good, Geordie said, already moving to configure the sensors, because something tells me we're going to need that kind of determination. On the bridge, Picard listened to the engineering report with growing concern. Counselor Deanna Troi stood at his shoulder, her empathic senses extended fully toward the being 3 decks below. His pain is extraordinary, she said softly. I've never felt such a combination of rage, guilt, and love. It's like standing next to a star about to go supernova. Can he be trusted? Riker asked from Tactical. He can be trusted to do exactly what he's promised, Troi replied. Find his son and destroy anything that stands in his way. Picard steepled his fingers, watching Regulus VI turn below them. Then we'd better make sure we're not standing in his way. Captain, Worf interrupted, his deep voice urgent. I am detecting a vessel entering the system. Klingon design, but... He paused, reading the display with visible surprise. Sir, it's a bird of prey under the command of Captain Kern. He's hailing us. On screen, the view screen shimmered, revealing a Klingon warrior whose scarred face carried a hungry grin. Picard, I heard your distress call about the dimensional anomaly. My science officer detected a most unusual energy signature aboard your vessel. His grin widened to show teeth. I thought to myself, perhaps the Federation has finally found something worth fighting. Tell me, Captain, is the legend aboard your ship as dangerous as our sensors suggest? Picard's jaw tightened. How did you... The Klingon Empire has been monitoring subspace anomalies ever since the Dominion War, Kern interrupted. When a rift tears through reality and deposits a warrior demigod onto a Starfleet vessel, we take notice. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. I wish to meet this Kratos, and I wish to see if he's worthy of the title God of War. In engineering, Kratos' head snapped up as if sensing the challenge across the void. Interesting, he murmured. Finally, warriors who do not hide behind soft words. Geordi grimaced. Yeah, you're gonna love the Klingons, or hate them, possibly both. The transporter room materialized around Captain Kern with the familiar tingle of molecular reconstitution. He stepped off the pad flanked by two of his warriors, both veterans of the Dominion War, both scarred and eager. The Enterprise crew maintained diplomatic distance, but Kern could smell their nervousness like blood in water. Good. Captain Kern, Picard greeted him with that infuriatingly composed expression. While I appreciate the Empire's interest in our situation, this is a delicate matter. Our guest is searching for his lost son, not looking for combat. Every warrior seeks combat, Kern replied, his voice a deep rumble. It is only a question of when and with whom. He sniffed the air, his enhanced Klingon senses detecting something beneath the ship's recycled atmosphere. Where is he? This god of war? Engineering, and he's not to be provoked. Kern's laugh echoed off the bulkheads. Picard, you disappoint me. A true warrior doesn't need provocation, merely opportunity. He started walking, forcing the captain to follow. Besides, if this Kratos is what our sensors suggest, he would be insulted by your coddling. Warriors respect strength, not diplomacy. They found Kratos in engineering's observation gallery, staring at the starfield beyond the transparent aluminum viewport. He didn't turn as they entered, but his shoulders tensed with awareness. Data stood nearby, monitoring a console that displayed complex quantum analyses. You are the Klingon, Kratos said without turning. I smell the blood on your hands. On old battles, recent kills. Kern's grin became savage. And I smell funeral pyres on yours. Entire civilizations reduced to ash. The scent of genocide clings to you like perfume. He stepped closer, unafraid. I am Captain Kern of the Imperial Klingon Defense Force. My brother tells stories of the Federation's weakness, their reluctance to do what must be done. You do not seem to share their restraint. Kratos finally turned. The two warriors studied each other, one a god forged in Greek fire and Norse ice, the other a Klingon tempered by generations of combat philosophy. They recognized something fundamental in each other's eyes. You honor your dead through battle, Kratos observed, reading Kern as he would read any predator. You find meaning in combat, had glory in death. There is no greater honor than dying in battle, Kern confirmed. We Klingons believe the afterlife is earned, not given. Sto-vo-kor, our warrior's paradise, awaits only those who die with honor. I know such places. Kratos' voice went distant. Valhalla, Elysium, the Greeks and Norse both promised eternity to their warriors. I have walked through their halls. I have seen what awaits those who die in glory. His eyes refocused, hard as flint. It is a lie. There is no honor in death, only absence, only loss. Kern's expression shifted from anticipation to intrigue. You speak as one who has experienced death personally. 3 times I have died. 3 times I have clawed my way back from the underworld. Once from Hades itself, killing everything in my path. Kratos stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they stood almost nose to nose. I do not fear death, Klingon. I have conquered it. What I fear is failing my son. Again. The observation gallery fell silent, Even Kern's warriors shifted uncomfortably at the raw pain in those words. "Then we understand each other," Kern said finally, his tone losing its aggressive edge. "I have sons. I have taught them the ways of honor, prepared them for a warrior's life. If they were lost—" He paused, something almost vulnerable flickering across his scarred features. "I would burn the galaxy to ash to find them." "Then you understand why I will not stop, why I cannot stop." "I do." Kern stepped back, offering a slight nod. "Respect between equals. The Enterprise may have found you, but Klingon sensors detected the rift's dispersal pattern. How not we have tracked similar quantum signatures to 3 possible locations." He activated his risk communicator, sending data to Data's console. "Federation technology is efficient, but Klingon technology is built for war, for hunting prey across the stars." Data's fingers flew across the console, analyzing the new information. "Fascinating." Captain Kern's data indicates the rift's energy didn't simply dissipate, it collapsed into stable micro-wormholes at 3 distinct points. He looked up, his pale eyes reflecting the star field. "Your son may have been deposited at any one of these locations." Picard stepped forward, diplomatic instincts warring with tactical reality. "Captain Kern, while I appreciate the information, this is still a Federation matter." "Is it?" Kern interrupted, his voice sharp. "Naya-dimensional rift threatens the stability of this entire sector. The Federation's prime directive prevents you from acting decisively. The Klingon Empire has no such weakness." He turned to Kratos. 3 locations, 3 possible destinations for your son. The Enterprise can investigate one. My bird of prey can investigate another. But the third— "I will go alone," Kratos said immediately. "Impossible," Picard objected. "You have no transportation, no way to navigate interstellar space." "Then give me a ship." The suggestion hung in the air like an unexploded photon torpedo. Riker, who had entered during the exchange, nearly choked. "You want us to hand over a Federation shuttlecraft to someone who threatened to destroy the Enterprise an hour ago?" "Yes," Kratos said simply. "Absolutely not." "Then I will take one." Geordi LaForge, watching the exchange with growing alarm, raised a hand. "Okay, setting aside the theft issue for a moment, you don't know how to pilot a shuttle. The navigation systems alone would take weeks to learn, and that's assuming you could even operate the controls without, smashing them." Kratos' expression darkened. "I piloted the flying chariot of Helios. I sailed the ship of the Damned through Hades itself. I commanded the Leviathan axe to freeze the Lake of the Nine. Do not tell me what I cannot do." "Those were magic," Geordi protested. "This is science." "Your science is the magic you understand," Kratos countered. "Show me these controls. I will learn." Data tilted his head, processing. "Actually, sir, it is theoretically possible. My analysis of Kratos' neural patterns suggests enhanced cognitive processing, likely a byproduct of his divine physiology. With proper instruction and my assistance, he could potentially achieve basic piloting proficiency in approximately 72 hours. "We don't have 72 hours, Kern interjected. "The micro-wormholes are already destabilizing. In 2 days, they'll collapse entirely, and the trail will be lost." He grinned at Kratos. "But there is another way. You could come aboard my vessel. Klingon ships are built for warriors, not diplomats. You would find the atmosphere more compatible." "No," Picard said firmly. "Kratos stays on the Enterprise where we can—" "Where you can what, Captain?" Kratos' voice cut through the room like a blade. "Watch me? Control me? I am not your prisoner, nor your responsibility. I accepted your help because it served my purpose, but I will not be caged while my son remains lost." Counselor Troy, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. "Captain, if I may, Kratos isn't lying about his capabilities. His determination is absolute. If we try to restrict him, he will either destroy this ship attempting to escape, or he'll simply take what he needs and leave us stranded." She looked at the god with something like sympathy. "He's been a prisoner before. He won't be one again." Picard's jaw tightened. Every Starfleet regulation, every principle of caution screamed at him to contain this threat. But staring into Kratos' eyes, ancient, exhausted, desperate, he saw something that transcended protocol. A father who had already lost everything once, who refused to lose what little remained. And very well, Picard said quietly. We'll divide our efforts. The Enterprise will investigate the first location, a Class M planet in the Gamma Hydra system. Captain Kern, if you're willing to commit Imperial resources, you can investigate the second location in the Qualler system. He paused, the words tasting like defeat. And Kratos, you'll take a shuttlecraft to the third location. Geordi and Data will provide accelerated training, but you'll be accompanied by one of my crew. I work alone. Those are my terms, non-negotiable. Kratos stared at the captain, measuring. Then reluctantly, who? Worf stepped forward, his massive frame rivaling Kratos' own. I will go. A warrior should not hunt alone. And if you attempt to steal Federation technology, his hand moved to his phaser. I will stop you. The two warriors regarded each other, God and Klingon, ancient violence and modern honor. You may try, Kratos said. Worf's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. That is acceptable. The shuttlecraft Copernicus felt like a coffin. Kratos sat in the pilot's seat, his large frame barely fitting the space designed for average humanoids. The console before him blazed with symbols and readouts that meant nothing, yet Data had spent the last 18 hours drilling their meanings into his mind with relentless precision. The android never tired, never showed frustration, simply explained the same concepts in different ways until understanding clicked. The impulse drive operates on standard Newtonian principles, Data had explained. Accelerate, decelerate, adjust heading. Why, the computer handles most calculations automatically. Your primary concern is navigation, avoiding obstacles and maintaining course to the coordinates. Kratos' fingers hovered over the controls now, remembering. Thrust, heading, inertial dampeners, shields. Each term another weapon in an arsenal he'd never wanted to master. Worf occupied the co-pilot's seat, his Klingon bulk making the shuttle feel even more cramped. He watched Kratos with predatory focus, one hand never far from the phaser at his belt. The Klingon wore honor like armor, but beneath it, Kratos sensed the same thing he'd seen in every warrior he'd ever met, the desire to test themselves against something greater. You want to fight me, Kratos observed without looking away from the view screen. In the third location, a nebula cluster, designated only as NGC 7293, shimmered in the distance like a dying god's final breath. I am curious, Worf admitted. The legends of gods on Earth, Thor, Ares, Zeus, are considered mythology by most humans. Children's stories. Yet you claim to have killed Zeus himself. I do not claim. I did. Kratos adjusted their trajectory, the shuttle responding smoothly to his input. The learning had been faster than even Data predicted. Perhaps because piloting this craft wasn't so different from wielding a weapon. Understanding the tool, anticipating its response, becoming one with its capabilities. I ripped him apart with my bare hands as Olympus burned around us. Why? The question hung between them like smoke. Kratos' hands tightened on the controls, knuckles whitening. Abra, because he deserved it, he said finally. Because he betrayed me, used me, made me into a monster, and then acted surprised when the monster turned on its creator. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because I could not save my family, so I destroyed everything else instead. Worf was silent for a long moment. Then, among Klingons, we have a saying, revenge is a dish best served cold. But your revenge sounds like it burned hot enough to consume a world. Many world, Kratos corrected. I left nothing. The seas boiled. The sun fell from the sky. The very concept of Greece, as it once was, ceased to exist. He looked at Worf directly. That is what I am, Klingon. That is the creature your Captain Picard allowed aboard his ship. Not a hero, not even truly a warrior. A force of destruction given purpose only by the need to protect what little I have left. You speak of yourself as if you were a weapon. I am a weapon. The gods forged me as such. Kratos returned his attention to the view screen as they entered the nebula's outer edge. Colors bled across the screen, purples and blues and deep crimsons like dried blood. They gave me the strength to kill anything, the will to never stop, the curse of immortality so I would suffer eternally. They shaped me into their perfect tool. His lips twisted into something too bitter to be called a smile. They simply forgot that tools can break, and broken things are dangerous. The shuttle's sensors began screaming warnings. Electromagnetic interference, subspace distortions, radiation levels spiking across the spectrum. Worf's hands flew across his console, enter routing power to shields. The nebula is more unstable than Federation records indicated, he reported tersely. We should turn back, request a more heavily shielded vessel. No, Kratos pushed the shuttle deeper, ignoring the hull's protests. My son is in there. I feel it. You feel it? How? Kratos touched the rune on his forearm, the Nordic script pulsing with faint light. Atreus carries his mother's magic, her blood. Before she died, she bound us, father and son, so we would always find each other. Even across death itself, the rune pulsed again, stronger. He is close. The nebula swallowed them like a living thing. Visibility dropped to nothing. Sensors became useless, reading phantom contacts and ghost signals. Only the rune provided direction, a compass pointing toward the one thing in any universe that mattered. Hawk's there, Kratos breathed, spotting a massive structure emerging from the gas and dust. It wasn't a planet, wasn't a station. The thing floating before them defied easy classification, a twisted amalgamation of technology and something else. Organic components fused with metallic frameworks, conduits that pulsed like veins, architecture that hurt to look at because it existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. Impossible, Worf muttered, his tactical training warring with what his eyes reported. That configuration, it should not be able to maintain structural integrity, the gravitational stresses alone. Magic, Kratos said flatly. Your science ends where mine begins. They circled the structure, searching for an entrance. The thing was massive, kilometers across, maybe larger. Its surface crawled with symbols that Kratos recognized with growing dread. Some were Greek, some Norse, some were older still, primordial script from before the first gods rose from chaos. Someone has been collecting, he said quietly, stealing pieces of my world, my reality, bringing them here. For what purpose? Before Kratos could answer, the shuttle's remaining functional sensors detected something. Life signs, dozens of them, all humanoid, all in distress. And among them, one signature that made the rune on Kratos' arm burn with sudden intensity. Atreus, he breathed. Then the structure's weapons activated. Energy beams lanced out, not photon torpedoes or phasers, but something that screamed through the nebula with the fury of divine lightning. Kratos threw the shuttle into a dive, his newly learned piloting skills operating on pure instinct. The first beam missed by meters. The second clipped their shields, sending power systems cascading into failure. Shields down to 40%, Worf shouted, returning fire with the shuttle's pathetically inadequate phaser arrays. The beam splashed harmlessly against the structure's hull. We cannot win this fight. Then we don't fight. Kratos spotted an opening, a docking bay or wound. He couldn't tell which. We board. That is suicide. For mortals, perhaps. Kratos aimed the shuttle directly at the opening, cutting engines and letting momentum carry them forward. But I have died before. It never takes. The structure's weapons tracked them, charging for a final killing shot. Worf gripped his console, one every Klingon instinct screaming that this was a glorious death approaching. His hand moved to activate the distress beacon, to at least let the Enterprise know they'd found something. Kratos' hand shot out, crushing the communication panel before Worf could transmit. No, the god said. If this is a trap, I will not lead your captain and his crew into it. We go alone. That is foolish. That is final. The weapons fired, the shuttle jerked right at the last possible instant. Kratos' reflexes operating beyond human or even Klingon capabilities. The beam missed by centimeters, close enough that the electromagnetic pulse fried half their remaining systems. Then they were through the opening, plunging into darkness. The shuttle crashed into something metallic and unforgiving. Alarms wailed as hull breaches opened. Emergency containment fields activated, but they were dying. They had minutes at most before life support failed completely. Kratos was already moving, grabbing the emergency equipment pack. The Leviathan axe materialized in his hand from wherever he stored it. Data had wanted to study that particular capability. In the blades of chaos ignited with flame. "Come, Klingon," he said, his voice suddenly calm despite the chaos. "You wanted to see how a god makes war. Now you will." Worf checked his phaser, drew his bat'leth from its back sheath, and bared his teeth in a savage grin. "Kapla, today is a good day to fight." "Today," Kratos corrected as they moved toward the shuttle's ruined airlock, "is a good day to save my son. Everything else is irrelevant." The airlock opened into nightmare. The corridor beyond pulsed with that same organic mechanical fusion. Walls that breathed, floor that felt warm and alive underfoot, and from somewhere deep within the structure, Kratos heard something that made his blood run cold. Laughter, old laughter, divine laughter, the sound of gods who had found a new toy to break. "Atreus," he whispered, breaking into a run. "Hold on, boy. Father is coming." Behind him, Worf kept pace, both warriors charging toward whatever fresh horror awaited them in the twisted bowels of a structure that shouldn't exist, hunting a boy who was more than mortal, pursued by enemies who had stolen the very fabric of divine reality itself. The war between universes had truly begun. The corridors twisted like intestines, organic and wrong. Kratos moved through them with the certainty of a predator following blood scent, the rune on his arm blazing brighter with each turn. Worf followed, bat'leth ready, his Klingon senses struggling with the structure's impossible geometry. "This place defies physics," Worf muttered, watching walls shift and reconfigure behind them. "Corridors that should intersect don't. Distances that should be meters feel like kilometers." "Space here is broken," Kratos confirmed, "bent by will rather than natural law. I have walked through Helheim's twisted passages, through the roots of Yggdrasil, where reality bleeds into dream. This is similar, a place where the rules of your universe hold no power." They rounded a corner and found the first bodies. 3 humanoids, their species unrecognizable, pinned to the walls by crystalline spikes that pulsed with sickly light. They were alive, chests rising and falling in shallow breaths. But their eyes were vacant, minds clearly gone. Tubes connected to the spikes fed into the walls, draining something essential from the victims. "Energy vampirism," Worf identified, his tactical training overriding his revulsion. "The structure is feeding on them. But why keep them alive?" "Because dead things hold no power," Kratos said, ancient knowledge rising unbidden. "The gods learned long ago that life contains energy death cannot match. Suffering, fear, hope, these things can be harvested, refined, used." He touched one of the crystalline spikes, felt the magic pulsing through it. "Whoever built this place knows the old ways. The dark ways." A sound echoed down the corridor, mechanical clicking mixed with something that might have been breathing. Kratos and Worf pressed against the walls, weapons ready. The thing that rounded the corner moved with insectoid precision, 4 legs supporting a torso that was part humanoid, part machine, all nightmare. Its face was a screaming fusion of organic horror and cold metal, eyes replaced by sensor arrays that swept the corridor with crimson light. It spotted them. Kratos moved first, the Leviathan axe flying from his hand with the force of a comet. The weapon struck the creature's center mass, frost spreading instantly across its hybrid body. The thing shrieked, a sound that was static and agony combined, and lunged forward despite the ice encasing its limbs. Worf met its charge with a Klingon battle cry, his bat'leth sweeping in a perfect arc. The blade bit deep into the creature's neck, sparks and ichor spraying in equal measure. It collapsed, twitching, systems failing. But the noise had attracted others. They came from every direction, a dozen of the hybrid creatures, each slightly different, as if the structure was experimenting with different combinations of flesh and metal. Some moved on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had weapons grafted where hands should be. All of them screamed with voices that should have been impossible. "Back to back," Worf commanded, falling into a defensive stance. Kratos didn't answer, simply recalled the Leviathan axe to his hand and drew the blades of chaos. Fire and frost, the elements that had served him through 2 pantheons of slaughter. The first creature lunged and died screaming, torn apart by chain whips that moved faster than thought. The second froze solid from the axe's kiss. The third, fourth, and fifth met similar fates, but there were always more. Worf fought with the disciplined fury of a Klingon warrior, his bat'leth singing through the air in patterns perfected over generations of combat. He was outmatched in raw strength, but his technique was flawless. Every strike found vital systems. Every movement conserved energy. He was a master of his craft. Kratos was simply destruction incarnate. The blades of chaos carved burning paths through metal and flesh. The Leviathan axe shattered limbs and froze internal systems. And when weapons weren't enough, Kratos used his bare hands, gripping heads and crushing them, tearing limbs from sockets, reducing the hybrid creatures to component parts with methodical brutality. The corridor became a charnel house. Ichor pooled on the breathing floor. Sparks rained from severed cables. The organic walls actually flinched away from the carnage, as if the structure itself felt pain. Then suddenly, silence. Kratos stood among the wreckage, breathing steady despite the exertion. Worf leaned against the wall, his uniform torn and bloodied, but his eyes alight with the fierce joy of survival. "You fight well," the Klingon said between breaths. "For a god." "You fight well," Kratos returned. "For a mortal." It was the closest thing to respect either had offered the other. The rune pulsed again, urgent now. Close, so close. They pressed deeper into the structure, past more victims pinned to walls, and past chambers filled with technology that hurt to perceive, past doorways that opened onto impossibilities. And finally, they reached a vast chamber that defied all sense of scale. The room was a sphere, easily a kilometer across, its walls covered in the same pulsing veins and crystalline growths. But at the chamber's center, suspended in a web of energy and organic material, were dozens of figures. Prisoners, captives, experiments. And among them, small and defiant despite his bonds, was Atreus. "Boy!" Kratos' voice echoed across the impossible distance. Atreus' head snapped up, his young face bruised but alive. "Father, don't! It's a trap! They wanted you to—" A new voice cut through the chamber, ancient and amused and terrifyingly familiar in its divine arrogance. "Kratos, ghost of Sparta, destroyer of Olympus, killer of the Allfather." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We have waited so long for your arrival." From the shadows at the chamber's far end, figures emerged. They moved with the fluid grace of immortals, each one radiating power that made even the structure's ambient energy seem pale by comparison. But they were wrong. Twisted. Gods, yes, but gods that had been changed, corrupted, fused with the same technological horror that infected this place. The lead figure stepped into the light, and Kratos felt something he hadn't experienced in years. True surprise. The being wore armor that was part ancient Greek bronze, part futuristic alloy. Its face was noble and cruel, bearing features Kratos recognized from statues and memories. But one eye was replaced with a glowing sensor array. One arm ended in a weapon that crackled with energy, and across its chest, scarred into metal and flesh alike, was a name in flowing Greek script. Ares. "Hello, brother," the god of war said, his voice static and divinity combined. "Did you really think killing me would be the end? Death is merely another realm to conquer. And in this universe," his hybrid face split into a terrible smile. "In this universe, I have found gods far older than Father Zeus, far more accommodating." Behind Ares, other figures emerged from the shadows. Kratos recognized them all. Gods he'd killed, gods who should be dead. But here they stood, reborn as something between their old divine selves and the cold precision of this universe's technology. Poseidon, half his face replaced with aquatic cybernetics. Hades, his body a fusion of death magic and life support systems. Hermes, his legendary speed now augmented by mechanical enhancements. In others, Norse gods mixed among them. Baldur, his invulnerability now supported by force field generators. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons whom Kratos had slain, rebuilt as weapons of divine vengeance. "What have you done?" Kratos breathed, horror and rage warring in his voice. "I have evolved," Ares replied. "We all have. You taught us that gods are not eternal, Kratos, that we can be killed. So we adapted. We found a universe where death can be reversed, where the line between life and machine blurs, where consciousness can be preserved and enhanced. He gestured at the prisoners suspended around the chamber. We've been collecting, learning, experimenting, and now, we have something you want. His gaze flickered to Atreus. The boy is special, half god, half giant, touched by prophecy and fate. His power opened the rift. His blood will fuel our ascension. Ares' hybrid eye focused on Kratos with mechanical precision. And you, dear brother, will watch him become our greatest creation. Or, he paused, savoring the moment. You can fight us, all of us. Gods you've already killed once, now reborn with the power to kill you in return. A pantheon of vengeance armed with technology you cannot understand, in a place where your divine strength means nothing. The chamber fell silent except for the pulsing of organic walls and the hum of incomprehensible machinery. Worf gripped his weapons, calculating odds that no Klingon had ever faced. Fighting gods was one thing. Fighting dead gods rebuilt as something worse was another entirely. But Kratos simply stared at his son, at the boy who represented everything he'd fought to protect, everything he'd tried to become in the years after his rage finally burned itself out. I have a better idea, Kratos said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. He took a step forward. I kill you all. Again. The blades of chaos ignited with fury that could burn worlds, and the god of war went to war. Kratos launched himself across the impossible distance, his divine strength making mockery of physics even here. Ares met him mid-chamber, their collision creating a shockwave that rippled through the organic walls. Ancient hatred crashed against ancient hatred. Brother against brother, God against God, death against resurrection. Nar, you were always so predictable, Ares snarled, his cybernetic arm morphing into a blade that matched Kratos' own weapons. So emotional. Father was right about you, a blunt instrument pretending to be a warrior. Kratos didn't waste breath on words. The blades of chaos wrapped around Ares' enhanced limbs, flames searing both metal and divine flesh. His brother screamed, a sound that was equal parts agony and digital corruption, and retaliated with energy blasts from his integrated weapon systems. The chamber exploded into chaos. Poseidon surged forward, water manifesting from nowhere despite the vacuum of space beyond the structure. But this water was wrong, mixed with nanomachines that sought to invade and control. Worf found himself suddenly fighting a god of seas he'd only read about in Earth mythology. Hana his bat'leth cleaving through liquid that tried to drown him from the inside out. Klingon! Poseidon's voice was waves and static. You dare raise weapons against... Worf's battle cry cut him off. I am Lieutenant Commander Worf, son of Mog of the House of Martok. I have faced the Borg. I have stood against the Dominion. You are just another enemy. His blade found something solid within the water form, drew ichor and oil in equal measure. Hermes blurred into motion, his legendary speed now augmented by temporal manipulation technology. He struck at Kratos from 7 angles simultaneously, each blow carrying the force of a photon torpedo. Kratos took 3 hits, felt ribs crack, tasted blood, then caught the god mid-strike on his 4th pass. Fast, Kratos acknowledged, his grip crushing the cybernetic components in Hermes' ankle. But speed means nothing if you cannot break free. He slammed Hermes into the floor with enough force to crater the organic metal. The god's enhanced body sparked and bled, systems failing. Kratos raised the Leviathan axe for a killing blow. Hades materialized behind him, death magic and technology combining to create a neural disruptor. Pain unlike anything Kratos had felt since his torture in Tartarus lanced through his nervous system. His muscles locked. The axe fell from nerveless fingers. Did you think we would be as weak as before? Hades whispered, his skull-like face now augmented with sensors that read life signs and targeted vulnerabilities. We died, Kratos. We experienced the ultimate weakness, and we learned from it. Across the chamber, Baldur and Modi descended on Worf. The Klingon fought with everything he had, honor, more skill, fury, but these were gods. Modi's hammer, now fused with gravitational technology, struck with the force of a collapsing star. Baldur's invulnerability was absolute, every strike bouncing off force fields that shimmered with divine and technological power. "This is what passes for a warrior in this universe?" Baldur laughed, catching Worf's batleth mid-swing and snapping it like kindling. "Pathetic!" Worf snarled, drew his phaser, and fired point-blank into Baldur's face. The beam splashed harmlessly across shields. "Even more pathetic," Modi added, his hammer descending. Then Atreus screamed, not in pain, in fury. The boy's eyes blazed with power, that impossible mix of giant's magic and divine heritage. The energy bonds holding him shattered. His bow, somehow still with him, immaterialized in his hands along with arrows that glowed with runic power. "Get away from him!" Atreus roared, his voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself shudder. 3 arrows flew faster than thought. Each one found its mark with precision no child should possess. The first struck Modi's hammer, disrupting its gravitational field and sending the god staggering. The second pierced Baldur's force field generator, the one vulnerability in his technological rebirth. The third hit Hades' neural disruptor, shattering it. Kratos gasped as feeling returned to his limbs. He rolled, caught the Leviathan axe as it flew back to his hand, and came up swinging. The axe took Hades in the chest, frost spreading through cybernetic components and divine essence alike. And the god of death screamed, actually screamed, as his own element turned against him. "Impossible!" Hades choked, his enhanced body freezing solid. "We cannot die again. We are beyond death." "Nothing is beyond death," Kratos said coldly. "I proved that when I killed you the first time." He shattered the frozen god into crystalline fragments. Ares roared in rage and grief, emotions fighting against his cybernetic conditioning. He unleashed everything, every weapon system, every enhancement, channeling power that made the structure itself groan in protest. Energy beams, missiles, gravitational distortions, reality tears, all directed at Kratos with the fury of a god who had been given a second chance and refused to lose it. Kratos met the assault head-on. The blades of chaos moved in patterns too fast to follow, deflecting energy beams and solid projectiles alike. The Leviathan axe created barriers of ice that absorbed impossible attacks, and when his weapons weren't enough, Kratos used his divine resilience, taking hits that would vaporize mountains, tanking damage that would crack planets, enduring because that's what he did. He endured, and then he attacked. The gap between them closed in an instant. Kratos was inside Ares' guard, too close for ranged weapons, forcing close combat where raw power and skill mattered more than technological advantage. The blades wrapped around his brother's throat, the axe bit into cybernetic components, and Kratos' bare hands gripped, tore, destroyed. "You were always stronger," Ares gasped, his systems failing one by one. "Always the better warrior. Father knew it, I knew it. And that's why I made you what you are. Because I wanted someone who could match me. Someone worthy." "I was never yours to make," Kratos snarled, pulling Ares closer. "And I am not a weapon anymore." "Then what are you?" Kratos looked past his dying brother to where Atreus stood free, bow ready, young face set with determination. "I am a father," he said simply, and he tore Ares' hybrid heart from his chest. The god of war, both the old and the new, collapsed, systems going dark, divine essence leaking away. Around the chamber, the remaining hybrid gods hesitated. Poseidon's water form flickered. Hermes, still embedded in the floor, tried and failed to vibrate free. Modi and Baldur backed away from where Worf had somehow managed to survive, battered but unbroken. "Retreat," Poseidon commanded. "Sire, fall back to—" "No!" A new voice entered the chamber, cold and absolute. "They have come too far, seen too much. They cannot leave." The shadows at the chamber's far end parted, revealing a final figure. This one wasn't Greek, wasn't Norse. It wore robes that predated civilization itself, and its face was hidden behind a mask of circuits and ancient symbols. But the power radiating from it made even Ares' hybrid form seem pale in comparison. "I am the architect," it said, each word causing the structure to pulse in sympathy. "The one who found your dead gods drifting in the void between universes, the one who saw potential in their corpses, The one who has been building something glorious from the wreckage of your failed pantheons. It gestured and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the true horror. And the structure wasn't alone. Dozens, hundreds of similar constructs floated in the nebula, each one pulsing with stolen life and corrupted divinity. A fleet of nightmare vessels, each one a fusion of magic and technology, god corpses and machinery, ready to spread across the universe. You have destroyed a handful of my experiments, the architect continued. Congratulations, but they were merely prototypes, test subjects. The real work, it focused on Atreus. The real work requires the boy, his blood, his power, his unique existence at the intersection of prophecy and possibility. Kratos moved to stand between the architect and his son, weapons ready despite exhaustion. You will not touch him, he said. I already have, the architect replied. Why do you think the rift brought you here? And why do you think I allowed you to fight through my creations? You, Kratos, ghost of Sparta, god killer, father, you are the final component. It raised a hand, and energy bonds snapped out, wrapping around Kratos faster than he could react. Your rage, your power, your absolute refusal to accept defeat, combined with the boy's divine potential and my technological mastery, the bonds tightened, lifting Kratos off the ground. We will create something that transcends gods and machines alike, something that can reshape reality itself. Kratos struggled, divine strength straining against bonds that shouldn't hold him. But they did, because they weren't just technology. They were powered by the very gods he'd killed, their essence refined and weaponized against him. He looked at Atreus, at Worf barely standing, at the impossible odds. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes of war, Kratos felt something he thought burned away centuries ago. Doubt. Worf dragged himself upright, every muscle screaming protest. Blood, his own, dripped from a dozen wounds. His bat'leth was broken, his phaser depleted. By any reasonable assessment, he should be dead. But Klingons didn't die reasonably. Kratos, he shouted across the chamber. The Enterprise! If I can reach the communicator... No! Kratos roared, straining against the energy bonds. I told you, I will not lead Picard into this trap. You will... He choked as the bonds constricted. You will die here if you must, but you will not doom your crew. How noble, the architect observed, tilting its massed head. How utterly predictable. The god who destroys everything still believes he can protect something. It gestured, and more bonds snapped out, wrapping around Atreus despite the boy's struggles. Let me show you the futility of such beliefs. The chamber's walls pulsed, images appearing across their organic surfaces. Worf recognized them immediately. Starship schematics, Federation, Klingon, Romulan, and others, all marked with targeting data. While you fought my experiments, my fleet completed calibrations, the architect explained. Every vessel in this sector, including your precious Enterprise and Captain Kern's bird of prey, has been mapped, analyzed, and marked for conversion. In 1 hour, my fleet disperses. In 2, we begin collecting new subjects. In 3, the mass turned toward Kratos. In 3 hours, this universe learns that its age of logic and reason has ended. The age of gods returns. But this time, gods that cannot die. The gods that serve me. You're insane, Worf spat. The Federation will stop you. The Klingon Empire will fight bravely and die screaming, the architect interrupted. I have studied your civilizations extensively. Individually powerful, collectively vulnerable. United by treaties that fracture under pressure, bound by principles that prevent decisive action. It laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your Captain Picard will waste precious time debating the Prime Directive. The Klingons will charge headlong into traps. And by the time your peoples unite, my fleet will have converted enough vessels to be unstoppable. Kratos' mind raced, searching for options. His weapons hung useless at his sides, held by bonds he couldn't break. Atreus struggled nearby, his divine power somehow nullified by the architect's technology. When Worf was barely standing, and the fleet... Wait. You talk too much, Kratos said suddenly, forcing calm into his voice. Like every god I've ever killed, monologuing about inevitable victory, explaining elaborate plans. He met the architect's masked gaze. Why? If we're truly no threat, why waste words? Silence. The chamber's pulsing intensified. Because, Atreus said quietly, understanding dawning in his young eyes, it's buying time. The conversion process. It's not ready yet. It needs more power. Needs, he looked at his father, needs us. The architect's posture shifted infinitesimally. Confirmation. Clever boy, it admitted. Yes, the fleet requires a final surge of divine energy to achieve full functionality. Your father's immortal essence combined with your hybrid nature will provide exactly what's needed. I could extract it by force, but that damages the quality. Better to let you exhaust yourselves fighting, draining your reserves, making the harvest clean and efficient. Then you made a mistake, Kratos growled. Did I? Yes. Kratos closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself. Past the rage, past the guilt, past the centuries of violence and loss, down to the core of what he was. Not the warrior the gods had made, not the monster he'd become, but the man he'd chosen to be. The bonds holding him flared brighter, feeding on his divine energy, exactly as he'd intended. Worf, he said calmly, when I was on the Enterprise, Data mentioned something about how your ship's warp core works. Matter and antimatter, held apart by magnetic fields. Yes, Worf replied slowly, not understanding. Catastrophic failure if the containment breaches. His eyes widened. No, you cannot be suggesting. I am suggesting, Kratos said, opening his eyes, that gods are not so different. Divine energy, held in mortal form, contained by will and purpose. He looked at his son. Atreus, close your eyes. This will be unpleasant. Father, what are you? Trust me, boy. Then Kratos stopped holding back. Every lifetime of accumulated divine power, from his original godhood as Olympus's warrior, from killing Zeus and absorbing his lightning, from slaying Baldur and dozens of Norse entities, from every impossible battle and resurrection, all of it he released at once. Not as an attack, as an overload. The energy bonds didn't just break, they shattered, feedback screaming through the architect's systems. The chamber convulsed as power meant to be slowly drained, suddenly exploded outward in an uncontrolled surge. Lights blew out, organic walls caught fire. The crystalline spikes holding prisoners across the chamber cracked and shattered. Kratos fell to his knees, gasping. The release had cost him. He could feel his divine nature weakening, burning out like a star going nova. But it had worked. The architect staggered, its mask cracking, revealing something ancient and horrible beneath. What have you done? The feedback, the fleet, is experiencing catastrophic power failures. Data's voice suddenly crackled through the structure's failing systems. Enterprise to Lieutenant Worf. We have detected massive energy fluctuations throughout the fleet. Multiple structures losing cohesion. Whatever you did, it is working. Data! Worf shouted at the ceiling. I thought you couldn't penetrate the nebula's interference. We could not, Data confirmed, until 30 seconds ago, when every vessel in the fleet simultaneously broadcast a surge of uncontrolled energy. We are detecting structural failures across... Explain later, Picard's voice cut in. Worf, transport coordinates locked. Beaming you out now. No, the architect shrieked, lunging toward Atreus. I need the boy. I need... Kratos intercepted it mid-lunge. Divine power depleted but mortal fury infinite. His fist struck the architect's form with brutal efficiency. No longer godlike strength, but the raw determination of a father who had crossed universes to save his son. You need nothing, Kratos snarled, driving the architect into the chamber floor. You are nothing. And just another fool who thought power made them inevitable. He raised his fist for a final blow. I have killed gods, kings, titans, and now... The transporter beam caught them mid-battle. Reality dissolved into golden particles. The dying structure, the architect's screams, the fleet's collapse, all of it vanished. Then they materialized on the Enterprise transporter pad, Kratos' fist still raised, the architect's form already dissolving into corrupt data and dying magic. Stand down! Security personnel surrounded the pad, phasers trained on Kratos, but the gods simply released the architect's corpse, let it collapse into corrupted fragments, and turned to where Atreus stood on the adjacent pad. "Boy," he said quietly, "are you hurt?" Atreus shook his head, then threw himself at his father, with small arms wrapping around the god's scarred torso. "I thought I'd lost you. When the rift opened, I thought..." "I know." Kratos held his son, felt the boy's heartbeat against his chest. Real, alive, safe. "I know." Picard stepped onto the transporter platform, his expression carefully neutral despite the scene before him. "Mr. Worf, report." Worf straightened despite his injuries, forcing military bearing. "Captain, the hybrid gods are destroyed. The architect is neutralized. The fleet is..." He glanced at the tactical display a nearby ensign hastily provided. "Collapsing. The power surge Kratos triggered has caused cascading failures throughout the entire network." "Confirmed," data added from the bridge via comm. "All structures are losing integrity. Estimate complete dissolution within 18 minutes. Gosh, we should move to a safe distance." "Make it so," Picard ordered. Then he looked at Kratos. "You deliberately overloaded your own divine power to sabotage the fleet. That kind of sacrifice..." He paused. "You could have died." "I have died before," Kratos replied. "It is not dying that frightens me. It is failing him." He held Atreus closer. Again. Counselor Troy appeared in the doorway, her empathic senses clearly overwhelmed. "Captain, I'm sensing... I've never felt anything like this. Such profound relief mixed with exhaustion, and underneath it..." She looked at Kratos with something like wonder. Peace. Actual peace. For the first time in millennia. Kratos said nothing, just held his son. "Sir," Geordi's voice crackled through the comm. "The rift signature, we can recreate it. Not permanent, but stable enough to send them home if we act quickly. But I need to know now." All eyes turned to Kratos. The god slowly straightened, gently setting Atreus aside. He looked around the transporter room, at Picard's measured respect, at Worf's warrior's acknowledgement, at the security personnel who had slowly lowered their weapons without orders. "Your Federation," he said slowly, "you truly believe in these principles? Peace through understanding? Strength through unity?" "We do," Picard replied. "Though we often fall short, we're not perfect, Kratos, just trying to be better than we were." "Better than you were?" Kratos considered this. Then he looked at Atreus. "Boy, do you wish to stay? To see more of this strange universe?" Atreus shook his head. "I want to go home. Back to the cabin. Back to..." He smiled slightly. "Back to being bored." Kratos' lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Bored sounds good." He turned to Picard. "Captain, thank you for your help, for teaching me that not all who offer aid seek to control." He nodded to Worf. "Klingon, you fight with honor. In another life, we might have been brothers." "In another life," Worf replied, returning the nod. "Kapla, god of war." "Mr. LaForge," Picard said quietly, "open the rift." The Enterprise's deflector array hummed with unprecedented power as Geordi fed everything he'd learned about the rift's quantum signature into the system. On the bridge, the main view screen displayed the nebula's swirling chaos punctuated by the dying light of collapsing structures. The architect's fleet was tearing itself apart in slow motion, each explosion sending cascades of corrupted divine energy scattering across subspace. "Rift forming," data reported from Ops. "However, the quantum instability is severe. I estimate a maximum window of 4.3 minutes before collapse." In the transporter room, Kratos stood with Atreus at his side, watching as golden light began to coalesce in the air before them. But something felt wrong. The light flickered, pulsed irregularly, not the steady tear between dimensions he'd experienced before. "The hybrid gods' deaths have destabilized the dimensional barriers," Data's voice explained through the comm. "The rift is attempting to form, but without the boy's power to anchor it..." "I understand," Atreus said quietly, stepping forward. He raised his hand, and the runes tattooed along his arm blazed to life. Ancient giant magic, the legacy of his mother Faye, poured into the unstable rift. The flickering steadied. the tier widening into a swirling portal of impossible colors. Through it, Kratos could see home, the forests of Midgard, the lake, their cabin in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney as if they'd never left. "The pathway is stable," Atreus confirmed, though his voice strained with effort. "But I can't hold it long." "Then we go now." Kratos turned to face Picard one final time. "Captain, you asked earlier if I trusted your Federation's principles. I did not answer honestly." Picard waited, expression neutral. "I have seen empires rise on noble words," Kratos continued. "Watch them corrupt and fall. The Greeks promised justice. The Norse promised honor. Both delivered only suffering." He paused. "But I have also learned that principles matter less than the people who uphold them. You could have contained me, weaponized me, used me as your gods once did. Instead, you offered help without chains. That is what we aspire to," Picard said. "Though, as I mentioned, we often fall short." "All who strive do," Kratos replied. "What matters is the striving itself." He glanced at Worf, still standing at attention despite his injuries. "Your warriors fight with honor. Your people value life over power. Perhaps," he hesitated, unused to such admissions, "perhaps your Federation will succeed where the gods failed." "That is all we can hope for," Picard said. Then, surprising everyone, including himself, he extended his hand. "Safe journey, Kratos. May you find the peace you seek." Kratos stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In his experience, hands extended in friendship often concealed daggers, but Picard's hand remained steady, open, honest. The ghost of Sparta, killer of gods and destroyer of pantheons, reached out and clasped the captain's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. The words felt foreign on his tongue. How long since he'd spoken them and meant them? Centuries? Millennia? Atreus's strain became visible, the rift wavering despite his efforts. "Father, now!" But before Kratos could move toward the portal, alarm screamed across the bridge. "Captain!" Data's voice carried unprecedented urgency. "One of the collapsing structures just changed course. It is on a collision trajectory with the Enterprise." On the view screen, a dying construct, one of the larger ones, by kilometers of corrupted divine technology and organic horror, tumbled through space directly toward them. Its systems were failing, but its mass alone would obliterate the ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Riker ordered. "Full impulse." "Inertial dampeners cannot compensate at this velocity," Data reported. "Impact in 47 seconds. Picard's mind raced through options. They couldn't beam the crew off in time, couldn't outrun the debris. Shields wouldn't hold against that much mass. This was it. A random piece of wreckage was about to end the Enterprise's legendary career. Then Kratos moved. "Keep the rift open," he commanded Atreus, already running toward the transporter pad's edge. "Picard, transport me to the exterior hull. Now." "What? That's suicide. The vacuum will—" "I am a god," Kratos interrupted, "or what remains of one. My divine essence is depleted, but I still do not need air, and I can still move very, very fast." His eyes blazed with determination. "Transport me. Trust me as I have trusted you." Picard held his gaze for a heartbeat. Then, "Chief O'Brien, do it." "Sir, regulations." "Now, Chief." The transporter beam caught Kratos mid-stride. He materialized on the Enterprise's hull, space's vacuum pulling at him, absolute cold searing his skin. But gods did not die from cold, did not suffocate in airlessness. They simply endured. The dying structure loomed above him like a mountain of metal and flesh, spinning end over end, 30 seconds from impact. Kratos planted his feet against the hull, drew the Leviathan axe, and threw it with every remaining ounce of divine strength. The weapon flew true, frost trailing behind it like a comet. It struck the structure's center mass, and Kratos poured everything he had left into one final command. Freeze. Ice exploded outward from the impact point, spreading across the structure with supernatural speed. Organic components froze solid. Metal grew brittle. The construct's rotation slowed as its mass suddenly met resistance from laws that shouldn't apply in space, but did because a god commanded them. 20 seconds. The structure kept coming, now a frozen missile instead of a tumbling wreck. Slower, but still fatal. Kratos recalled the axe, caught it in mid-flight, and threw again and again. Each impact spreading more ice, each freeze stealing more momentum. His divine power drained with each throw, the well of godhood that had once seemed infinite now running dry. 10 seconds. Still not enough. The structure would hit, and maybe not with full force, but hard enough to cripple the Enterprise. Kratos' hands moved to the blades of chaos. He had sworn not to use them except in the most dire circumstances. They represented his worst self, his most violent nature. But sometimes the old ways were necessary. One last time, he whispered to the blades, for something worth protecting. The chains ignited with flame that burned cold in space's vacuum. Kratos whipped them outward, wrapping the structure in burning chains that somehow found purchase on frozen metal and corrupted flesh. Then he pulled. His feet tore furrows in the Enterprise's hull as he became an anchor, divine strength fighting physics itself. The structure's trajectory shifted. Not much, just degrees, but in space, degrees meant everything. 3 seconds. The construct screamed past the Enterprise, close enough that fragments scraped along the shields. Close enough that Data would later calculate the margin as 1.7 meters. Close enough that Kratos felt the displaced space-time wash over him like a wave, but not close enough to hit. The structure tumbled away into the nebula's depths, freezing and burning simultaneously, carried by momentum into the void where it would eventually disperse into cosmic dust. Kratos collapsed to his knees on the hull, the blades of chaos falling silent, the Leviathan axe heavy in his hand. His divine essence was gone, truly gone now. He could feel mortality settling over him like a shroud. No more resurrection, no more godly endurance, just a man with scars and memories. "Transport him back," Picard ordered quietly. "Quickly." The beam caught Kratos, pulled him back inside. He materialized on the pad and immediately fell forward. Worf caught him before he hit the deck, the Klingon's strength barely sufficient to hold the god's weight. "Foolish," Worf muttered. "Heroic, but foolish." "Had to," Kratos gasped. "Could not. Let them die. For my mistakes." Atreus was there immediately, small hands touching his father's face. "Father, you're freezing. And your eyes, they're not glowing anymore. Your power is gone," Kratos confirmed, forcing himself upright despite Worf's protest. "I gave everything to stop that thing, but it was worth it." He touched his son's cheek. "Come, we go home, before I become too mortal to make the journey." The rift still held, pulsing with Atreus' power, showing the forests of Midgard waiting beyond. But now it flickered more urgently, the boy's strength flagging. "Wait," Picard stepped forward. "Dr. Crusher should examine you first." "No," Kratos straightened, forcing strength into limbs that felt leaden and weak. "I have spent lifetimes being examined by those who sought to use me. I will spend my remaining years, however few, in peace." He looked at the captain. "But I will remember this. Remember that when the gods failed me, mortals showed me mercy." He took Atreus' hand, and together they walked toward the rift. At the threshold between universes, Kratos paused and looked back. "Captain Picard, if your Federation ever truly falls, if the darkness you fear becomes reality, send word across the void. I may no longer be a god, but I am still a warrior, and I protect those who deserve it." "Let us hope," Picard replied, "that such a day never comes. But if it does, we will remember who stood with us when we needed him most." Kratos nodded once. Then he and Atreus stepped through the rift. The portal collapsed behind them with a sound like reality, sighing in relief. The transporter room fell silent except for the Enterprise's eternal hum and Worf's labored breathing. "Remarkable," Picard said softly. "A being of pure destruction, choosing to save rather than destroy. Perhaps there is hope for us all." "Captain," Data's voice interrupted from the bridge. "Sensors confirm all remaining structures have collapsed. The threat is neutralized. And," he paused, "Sir, I am detecting dozens of life signs among the debris. The prisoners from the structures, they survived the collapse, encased in emergency stasis fields." "Begin rescue operations immediately," Picard ordered, heading for the bridge. "Point a coordinate with Captain Kern. We have people to save. As he walked, he allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Sometimes, against all odds and logic, the universe provided moments of genuine heroism. Today had been one of those days. The cabin in Midgard stood exactly as they'd left it, though to Kratos it felt like lifetimes had passed. He collapsed into the chair by the hearth, every muscle aching with purely mortal exhaustion. The fire crackled. No divine flame, just honest wood burning, warm and real. Atreus moved about the cabin with practiced efficiency, gathering furs and brewing tea from herbs his mother had once shown him. The boy was quiet, processing everything they'd experienced, but Kratos could see the questions building behind his eyes. "Ask," Kratos said finally, accepting the tea with hands that trembled slightly. Immortal hands now. "Your power," Atreus began, sitting cross-legged on the floor before his father. "It's really gone? All of it?" "Yes." Kratos sipped the tea, tasted its warmth without the dulled senses of a god. Everything felt sharper now, more immediate. "I burned through centuries of accumulated divinity to save those people. I am..." He paused, testing the word. "I am mortal now. Truly mortal." "Will you die?" The question emerged small and frightened. "Eventually, as all mortals do." Kratos set down the tea, reached out to rest his hand on his son's head. "But not today. Not for many years if I'm careful. And when I do," he managed something that might have been a smile. "When I do, it will be permanent. No more resurrections. No more climbing from the underworld. Just peace." Atreus absorbed this, his young face struggling with complex emotions. "Are you scared?" "No." Kratos realized with some surprise that it was true. "I have been a god. I have been a monster. I have been a weapon. Perhaps it is time to simply be a man, a father. Perhaps that is enough." They sat in silence for a while, the fire's warmth filling the cabin. Outside, the forests of Midgard rustled with evening wind. Somewhere a wolf howled. Life continued as it always had, indifferent to the cosmic struggles playing out across universes. "The Enterprise," Atreus said eventually. "Captain Picard and his crew. They were different from the gods you've known." "They were." Kratos stared into the flames, seeing Picard's steady gaze in his mind. "They offered help without demanding servitude, showed strength without tyranny. Perhaps..." He trailed off. "Or perhaps what? Perhaps I was wrong. About civilization, about people working together." Kratos looked at his son. The Greeks and Norse both preached unity, while their gods schemed and betrayed. But the Federation, they actually practice what they claim to believe, imperfectly, with mistakes, but they try. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Atreus asked. Kratos considered this. The rift was closed, the dimensional barriers restored, two universes separated by fundamental incompatibilities of physics and magic. The odds of crossing paths again seemed impossibly small. "No," he said honestly, "and perhaps that's for the best. They have their struggles, we have ours, but..." He stood slowly, moving to the window to watch twilight settle over the lake. "But I'm glad we met them. Was you glad you saw that not all who claim to serve a higher purpose are hypocrites? That there are those who genuinely seek to help?" "Like you," Atreus said quietly. "Like I'm trying to be," Kratos corrected. "I am not a hero, boy. I never will be. But I can be better than I was. Learn from those who showed me mercy when I deserved none." The night deepened outside. Kratos moved about the cabin, checking that everything was secure, performing the familiar rituals of home. No divine senses warned him of danger now. No godly power stood ready to answer threats. Just a man, protecting his home and son through vigilance and experience. It was enough. Far across the cosmos, aboard the USS Enterprise, Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood in his ready room, staring out at the stars. They'd recovered 43 survivors from the Architect's constructs, beings from a dozen different species, some known to the Federation, others completely alien. All of them bore the scars of imprisonment and experimentation, but all of them lived, because one individual had chosen sacrifice over safety. "Computer," Picard said quietly, "begin log entry. Stardate 47,832.6. We have completed rescue operations in the NGC 729-3 nebula. All survivors are receiving medical attention and will be returned to their respective homes when possible. The structures built by the entity known as the Architect have been completely destroyed. The threat has been neutralized. He paused, considering his next words carefully. During this mission, we encountered an individual named Kratos, a being from a dimensional framework where mythology and reality are one. He came to us seeking his lost son and left having shown us something I had almost forgotten. That heroism can emerge from the most unexpected sources. That even those forged in violence can choose peace. That redemption is always possible for those willing to pay its cost. Another pause. The stars turned outside his window, infinite and indifferent. I find myself wondering about the Federation's role in the greater multiverse. We pride ourselves on exploration, on seeking out new life and civilizations. But what of those civilizations that operate under fundamentally different rules? Where gods are real, where magic exists, where the laws we take as immutable are merely suggestions? Today we glimpsed such a reality, when it challenged everything we think we understand about the universe. He turned from the window, moved to his desk. Kratos spoke of empires that rose on noble principles and fell into corruption. A warning, perhaps, or a challenge. The Federation must remain vigilant against the very complacency we witness in his world's gods. The assumption that power grants wisdom, that victory ensures justice. We must constantly question ourselves, hold ourselves to the ideals we profess, or risk becoming the tyrants we claim to oppose. Lieutenant Worf displayed exemplary courage during this mission, fighting alongside a being of immense power without hesitation. Commander Data's analysis of the dimensional rift phenomena has opened new avenues of theoretical research. And Chief Engineer LaForge's ability to recreate the rift on short notice may have saved 2 lives while simultaneously protecting our universe from further incursions. Picard smiled slightly. But perhaps most significantly, we were reminded that every life has value. Every being deserves dignity. Every father seeking his son deserves our help, regardless of how alien they might seem. That is what separates us from those who would build empires on the corpses of their victims. That is what makes us more than the sum of our technologies and weapons. He ended the log, filed it in the ship's records where it would eventually make its way to Starfleet Command. Some admiral would read it and probably recommend psychological evaluation, but Picard didn't care. Some truths needed to be spoken, regardless of how they'd be received. "Bridge to Captain Picard," Riker's voice came through the comm. "Sir, we've completed final scans of the nebula. No remaining threats detected. Captain Kern sends his regards and reports his bird of prey is ready to depart." "Thank him for his assistance," Picard replied, "and lay in a course for Starbase 84. I believe the crew has earned some shore leave." "Aye, sir. Warp 7. Picard glanced out the window one final time, toward the nebula where impossible things had occurred, where gods had died twice, where a father had sacrificed everything for his son, where universes had touched and then separated, perhaps forever. "Warp 7, he confirmed. "Engage." The Enterprise turned away from the nebula, its warp nacelles glowing as the ship accelerated to faster-than-light speeds. Behind them, when the wreckage of the Architect's ambitions scattered across space, already being consumed by the nebula's natural processes. In a few years, there would be no evidence that any of it had happened. Just another mystery for future explorers to puzzle over. But those who had been there would remember the ghost of Sparta, who crossed universes for love, would remember that even gods could change, would remember that sometimes the line between mythology and reality was thinner than anyone imagined. In Midgard, Kratos woke to morning sunlight streaming through the cabin windows. He rose slowly, joints protesting in ways they never had when divinity flowed through his veins. Atreus still slept in his bed, young face peaceful in dreams. Kratos moved to the door, opened it to breathe morning air. The lake stretched before him, calm and beautiful. Birds sang in distant trees. Life, abundant and simple and real. He was mortal now, limited, vulnerable. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt free. The ghosts of Olympus and Asgard would always haunt him. The memories of violence and loss would never truly fade. But standing there in the doorway of his cabin, watching his son sleep safely, feeling the honest ache of mortal muscles. Perhaps this was what peace felt like. Perhaps this was what he'd been fighting for all along. Kratos closed the door softly, letting Atreus rest. There would be breakfast to make, wood to chop, 100 small tasks that filled a mortal life. No grand quests, no cosmic threats, just existence, day by day, moment by moment. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The ghost of Sparta's journey through Star Trek's universe had ended where all journeys must, at home, with those we love, having learned that true strength lies not in godhood, but in the courage to be simply, honestly human. Kratos had entered a universe of science and reason, carrying the weight of mythological violence. He'd encountered beings who valued diplomacy over destruction, who offered help without demanding servitude, who saw in him not a weapon to be used but a person deserving of dignity. Captain Picard and the Enterprise crew had shown him that civilization could exist without the corruption he'd witnessed in divine pantheons, that principles, imperfectly upheld, still mattered more than power perfectly wielded. In saving the Enterprise, Kratos had sacrificed his divinity, but in that sacrifice, what he'd gained something more precious, the knowledge that he could choose who to be, that redemption was possible, that a father's love transcended even the boundaries between universes. The Federation would continue its mission of exploration, forever changed by the brief intersection with a reality where gods were real in magic-shaped worlds. They'd been reminded that the cosmos was stranger and more wonderful than their science could fully explain, and that heroism could emerge from the darkest past. And in a cabin by a lake in Midgard, a former god and his son would live out their days in peace, carrying with them the memory of a starship crew who'd shown them that even in an infinite universe, kindness mattered, that even across dimensional boundaries, connection was possible. When that hope, whether shining from a Federation starship or flickering in a cabin's hearth, was the one truly universal constant. Two universes had touched, both were changed, both were better for it, and somewhere among the infinite variations of reality, perhaps they would touch again.